So for all those of you who know who Steve Bannon is, Steve Bannon is the former Trump guy who is being arrested today and turning himself into New York authorities for a fraud that occurred in the past. It was called We Build That Wall. Let me see if I can pull it up. First, let me let everybody understand what happened, how we got to here. So this started with a not-for-profit called We Build That Wall. Now, We Build That Wall was a project that some people got together and they said, let's raise a whole bunch of money, right, to build the southern border wall. It was going to take like $2 billion or $1 billion. So this guy, his name is Brian Kofage. He set up GoFundMe and said, hey, we're going to hit $1 million or $2 million, whatever that $2 million mark was, right? And if we hit the $1 billion, we're going to take that $1 billion and give it to Congress to say, build the wall. So they were going to take the $2 billion, if they raise $1 billion, take that $1 billion, whatever the amount needed to build the border wall, and give it to the federal government to build the border wall. Now, obviously, this was just a political thing. Just, hey, can we build, let's just grab some money. And they didn't really expect to get $1 billion. But this did happen after they raised the GoFundMe.
Enter Brian Colfax. He's a triple amputee Air Force vet who started a GoFundMe page for the wall, the wall that the politicians don't want to fund. And he started this just 3 days ago. In that short time, he's already raised more than $9.7 million.
Just 5 days, it's raised over $13 million due to donations from Americans. And in only 10 days, it has raised close to $18 million.
Today, Trish, I spoke to Brian Colfaige, the Air Force veteran who lost 3 of his limbs in combat. This is the man that started the GoFundMe page. In 3 weeks, Trish, he's raised $19 million.
The private GoFundMe group called Build the Wall raised $20 million in 20 days.
We Build the Wall has been raising money for their project online. So far, some $22 million has been raised.
We Build the Wall, that's the GoFundMe page that you were raising money to build this wall. What, about $23 million so far?
We Build the Wall, and founded by an Air Force veteran, broke ground last month.
So We Build the Wall had raised like $25 million, but there was a problem. GoFundMe, they needed to raise up like $1 billion before they get the money released, right? It was going to raise $1 billion to give it to Congress. But now, you weren't getting to $1 billion, but you raised $25 million. So you had one or two choices: give everybody back their money and start over again, or in some ways transfer the money from We Build That Wall to something else, so we can start using that 25 million, because at this point in time, they couldn't use the 25 million because that 25 million was just an amount to get, the way the GoFundMe was set up initially was that you had to reach the $1 billion mark to get the money released. But now you got 25 million in it. So they needed a way to get the 25 million out of that old GoFundMe, get it to another GoFundMe so they can use it and start spending it to build the wall. So this is what they came up with. This is Mike Cernovich.
I saw an update. Correct me if I'm wrong, because it took me a while to kind of figure this out. My understanding is that you're leaving the GoFundMe. You're going to start, is it a C4 or is it a C3? I've heard both.
We started a 501c4, We Build the Wall, Inc., and webuildthewall.us is our website.
So you started a 501c4, and the money from the GoFundMe is going to be transferred to the C4, but only if people opt in. Do I understand that correctly?
That is correct. We made a promise to people initially. If we did not hit the $1 billion mark, we would refund their money. I made that promise. I'm staying true to my word. And if people do not want to go forward with this, they can have a refund. If they want to go forward and build the damn wall, we're going to build that wall with this money, and we're going to build it directly. We're going to put it right down to the border.
Okay, so that's what I want to take a step back on is,
okay.
The default is people get a refund from the GoFundMe. Is that correct?
Right. After 90 days, if they don't respond, they will get a refund.
Now, the reason why you had to opt in is because you had given money to this, they're changing conditions, so you had to essentially give the permission to take your money out of the original campaign and move it to this new campaign. So that's what they did. Then they gave people assurances what they would do with their money after it was transferred from the one campaign to the other. So this is what they said they were going to do with the money they transferred during the campaign.
Hi, I'm Brian Kolfage, and I created the viral campaign that raised over $20 million for the southern border wall. And it's only possible because of your donation. So thank you. But do you really think the Democrats in Congress will take the money you donated and put it towards the southern border wall? I doubt it. That's why we are changing our mission from we fund the wall to we build the wall. And we the people can build the wall. We consulted with our nation's leading experts on border security and construction. There's hundreds of miles of private land along the border. To continue this mission, we need you to opt in so that your donation counts.
So that is what they were telling people. We need you to opt in so your donation counts. We need you to opt in. And here are the assurances. Now, this is what got them in trouble. See, they made assurances to people. Like, when I take your money and I make assurances to you that this is what I'm going to do with your money, this happens if you're very specific what you tell me you're going to do with my money and you don't do it. We start hearing words like fraud and things of that nature. So this is what he told people specifically he was going to do with that money. Now, listen, this is what got them in trouble. This is what they were telling people publicly, and why to give money to this second GoFundMe. Listen to this. This is very important.
Accepting our donations from everyone who's donating. It's still going on, and everyone who donates right now, your money goes towards this wall. 100% of your money goes towards the wall. It's not going to line someone's pocket. I'm taking $0 of the salary, no compensation. It's going towards the wall.
Now, he said he's taking $0 in compensation, 100% going to the wall. I'm not taking any money, no compensation for me. It's all going to the wall.
Mission is changing from we fund the wall to we build the wall. We need everyone to opt in. And when they opt in, it's ensuring that your donation counts towards this wall. If you don't opt in and you don't put your email address in there, your donation will not count and it will be refunded in 90 days.
How do you guarantee that every penny that goes to your GoFundMe account is going to go to the wall?
Well, like I said, next week we have big plans. I'm putting my name behind this. I'm standing up for the American people. They've all given me this money, and I'm guaranteeing it that's going to go to the wall. And we'll explain more next week when we get all the information nailed down legally.
So then if people are saying you're stealing the money, that just isn't true, right?
No, that's completely false. This whole project, I won't take a penny from these donations. Not a penny. I won't get paid from this corporation. Nothing.
Now, Another question is, what legal and guaranteed way can be ensured that the money will only go to the wall?
We have a finance audit committee, and it's in our bylaws. It lays out our bylaws, everything where this money goes and what it can be used for. The current money from the GoFundMe will only be used for the construction of the border wall. It won't be used for anything else. Now, future funds that are generated, there might be other costs that with admin and paying employees to build the wall. Mm-hmm. But the GoFundMe account, those funds only go towards the wall as promised.
Only goes to the wall as promised, right? He was asked, well, is it going to be going to other
Steve,
stuff?
we are so
it's like, no, we're going to go to the wall as promised. Now, people are probably saying, well, Nate, you're talking about this guy, Brian Kolfage, but we're about to get into the Steve Bannon piece because this is why you're seeing the Steve Bannon up there with the interview. So Steve Bannon gets involved after this, right? $25 million. We fund the wall till we build the wall. Now we got some interesting stuff going on, right? So they said, we're only spending every penny on the wall. I'm not taking a dime. No, nobody will be paid to me from that wall money. It's all going to the wall, right? Building a wall. No money to me, no money to anybody else. Money to me. So what happened? Well, Steve Bannon had a not-for-profit also. So they were like, well, how are we going to build this wall? So they contracted people to build the wall. But the government alleged in the federal lawsuit that we fund the wall now. We build the wall, paid Steve Bannon's not-for-profit as a consultant. And Steve Bannon, and they paid over a couple of $1 million, right? But guess who Steve Bannon company, his not-for-profit, guess who they were paying? They were paying Steve Bannon and Brian Kolfage. So what he did was say, okay, we build this wall, gets to $20 million. They were paying Steve Bannon's company as consultants, and Steve Bannon was paying Brian Kolfage. So essentially, that's how they were getting paid. So the government was like, that's fraud, right? You said 100% of this money is going to build the wall. It's not, it's going to you, right? And there was some elaborate gifts and all this other stuff. It was like a whole mess. So the government charged them all, said, hey, you guys defrauded people because you guys specifically were saying these things, specifically took these people money and said you're going to do these specific things with their money, and you didn't do them. Matter of fact, you paid yourself, right? And they unfortunately got caught out there. So here's Steve Bannon when he got involved with the We Build the Wall, and this is him explaining his involvement with it.
Honored to have you with us and part of this effort. What made you join this effort, and what does the border wall mean to you?
Well, look, we've been arguing about this for 30 years. And it was central. It was a central part of the Tea Party movement. It's one of the big reasons we had that huge victory in 2010. We were able to shut down DACA in 2013. It's really the heart of the Trump movement. I think it's one of the reasons, if not the reason, that Donald Trump's president of the United States. You've seen the difficulty he's had in trying to get this, forward in the White House. It was virtually impossible to get establishment Republicans to help the president, much less the Democrats. The Democrats have been increasingly radicalized over the last couple of years. Now they're even saying that it's immoral to, every presidential candidate is saying it's immoral to even have ICE. And I think when Brian came out before Christmas, it showed the frustration of the American people. The people have heard about the talk. They've heard about this, and now finally, a decorated veteran has come forward who actually fought overseas in these kind of endless Middle East wars, has come forward and said, hey, I'm going to take action, right? I'm going to look to my fellow citizens to put some money up, and we're going to go find the toughest sites in the country and start to build a wall. And I think
So Steve Bannon was in. He was into building a wall. They were building the wall. So he's in. So what happens next? Well, just so we're clear, then we have the government comes in, indicts them all, and says, hey, you guys steal them. And it's a paper case. Now, for those of you who don't know what a paper case is, it's just on the papers, right? This is what you said the money was going for. This is what you spent the money on. This is how you did it. It's a paper case, right? Guilt it's not hard to win a paper case for the government, right? It's just, would you say you need the money for? Would you promise you'd be able to spend the money on? Would you actually spend the money on? We got you, right? We got you. So the interesting part is that Brian Colfage, now they were all indicted and charged. So then Brian Colfage, unfortunately, what happened with him was he pleaded guilty and was facing up, got some jail time, or was facing 5 years in jail, but he pleaded guilty. He pleaded guilty, and some of the other people who were also involved pleaded guilty. So this is Brian Colfage pleading guilty to federal charges. Air Force veteran Brian Colfage faces more than 5 years after pleading guilty to defrauding donors to the private wall effort. So he got caught out there. So he pleaded guilty. The same guy was saying, we want to do this, pleaded guilty. I did it off. Blah, 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 blah. But what about Steve Bannon? Because you can say, okay, well, yeah, he pleaded guilty. But what about Steve? Well, Steve didn't need to plead guilty because one of President Trump's last acts was to help Steve Bannon out. Since this was a federal charges, Steve Bannon was pardoned by Trump. So the pardon meant that he wasn't going to face these charges. So Steve Bannon was pardoned by Trump. Trump pardoned Bannon as one of his final acts in office. So while the other people involved in We Build the Wall go to jail and they got convicted of federal charges, Bannon. Now I'm honestly surprised that Trump didn't pardon the whole group, but he just pardoned Bannon, maybe because he liked Bannon. I don't know. So Bannon was pardoned, so he didn't have to worry about it from a federal level. Now, Bannon thought, I'm assuming he thought that he was all good and well. But the problem is that they committed these frauds in all these different states, technically, right? You came here to New York, you're saying, I'm raising money for We Build That Wall. And if you're here in New York and you do the same thing, well, guess what? You've not only violated federal law, but you also violated New York state law, right? So just because you did the frauds nationally, then you got the federal issues. But now you've also done it locally in this particular state, New York. So New York said, well, since you are in New York and you've collected these funds and you've done exactly, violated New York law, we're going to prosecute you under New York law. Now, there's a lot of people who are saying, well, he was pardoned by Trump on federal charges. Yes, but that doesn't mean that he can't face state charges for crimes he committed within the state. And the pardon isn't really going to help. It's interesting because in New York, there's like this little procedure where if you are pardoned federally, then you really can't be charged in New York. But there's some little angle that Bannon doesn't fall into, because he was never actually really charged in the sense of he never stood trial. Like these other guys were going to trial, he never stood trial. So his situation is a little bit different. But unfortunately, Bannon, he got caught out there at the New York charges. Now, also, Texas is looking into this. Like there's a whole bunch of other states looking into this also too. Now, and generally, if you get caught out there on the feds, the states aren't going to come after you, but sometimes they can. Now, a case where this has happened before that I think you guys may be more familiar with is Ahmaud Arbery. Remember, he was a guy who was supposedly running and got killed by the two white guys in pickup trucks. The issue is that after that happened to Ahmaud Arbery, those guys were convicted on state charges. And then those guys were then convicted again on federal charges. And they got like 30 years. They got life imprisonment in the state. Then the federal government gave them life again for the feds. It was ridiculous. So it was a waste of time. They spent a life in prison in the state, but the state wanted to charge. The feds wanted to make sure they had them too. Same thing with the Rodney King case. Rodney King, they were acquitted in the state, and then they were found guilty in the feds. So this happens. And for those of you who are interested in what the doctrine's called, it's called the separate sovereign doctrine, where you have the states who are sovereign and then the federal government that's sovereign. So you can face charges in both sovereignty. And think about this. It's kind of like you go into England and commit crimes, then you come to the U.S. and commit crimes. Those are two separate places. So both of those people can charge you for the crimes that you commit. Now, I think the problem here with Bannon is that, number one, you got all the co-conspirators pleaded guilty, right? What kind of deal? And if I'm New York, and if I could charge Bannon, I could charge those other people too. So what type of deals are they going to make to give Bannon up, right? You could charge Brian again, right? He was doing those crimes with Fed. Now we could charge him again in New York. So what would you do? We'll charge you, or we want you to tell on boy. That's the way it works. Brian doesn't want to do no more time in jail. He's already pleaded guilty. And you know what the evidence of him violating the state charges are? He pleaded guilty to the feds. He pleaded guilty under oath saying that he did all this. Well, that's illegal in New York too. Yeah. So he's crazy. He's in trouble. So now what you're going to have is that let's let you guys understand. Let's talk about the spin, right? So you're going to have people saying he's guilty. And then you're going to have, because it's political, you're going to have people, he's innocent. They're just after him for this. Listen, don't forget, people need to understand this. It was the Trump Department of Justice that charged Bannon. It was the Trump administration that charged Bannon and company. And it was Trump that didn't pardon the other people. He just pardoned Bannon. So, so even if you think this is political, it was Trump's team that brought this initial prosecution and prosecuted and got these convictions. So now in New York, you may say, hey, these are Democrats, but the only thing they're doing is taking the same thing that the Trump Justice Department did and just start hitting Bannon with it. Bannon's been playing loose and weak with the facts for a while, but I think when you take people's money in a paper case, it's just so easy. I don't know why he got involved in this too, but $25 million is hard to turn away from. And then when you put a big face like Bannon to it with Trump connections, and and Bannon can come, he can get some money up too. So we'll see. But that's it. My name is Nate the Lawyer. Thanks again for stopping by, and I'll see you next time. Peace.